The sun was beginning its descent over the city of Willow Creek, casting a warm golden hue over the streets. Inside a sleek, dark blue BMW X5, Ava Patel, an elegant and successful South Asian woman, hummed to herself as she navigated her way home after a long day at work. She had just been promoted at the tech company where she worked and had a celebratory dinner planned with friends. As she rounded the corner onto Birchwood Avenue, a sudden flash of red and blue lights reflected in her rearview mirror. Her heart skipped. She wasn't speeding, hadn't made any erratic moves on the road. She knew this neighborhood well, and she'd never been pulled over before. Her grip on the steering wheel tightened as she slowed to pull over to the side of the road. Two officers, one tall, burly officer, Sergeant Rob Jennings, and his younger, more impatient partner, Officer Jack Ward, took their time walking towards her car. Jennings gave a quick nod to his partner before reaching the driver's side window. Ava rolled it down, trying to appear non-threatening. "Good evening, ma'am," Jennings said with forced politeness. "Can I see your license and registration?" Ava, though confused, remained calm. "Of course, officer," she said, her voice steady as she reached for her glove compartment. But before she could hand over the documents, Jennings' eyes darted to the shiny chrome rims of her BMW. "This car's a bit too fancy for someone like you, don't you think?" Jennings muttered under his breath, loud enough for her to hear. Ava's stomach dropped. The insinuation was subtle, but it was clear. Her car and her appearance had made her a target. "Is there a reason I've been pulled over?" Ava asked, her voice laced with caution. Officer Ward suddenly stepped closer, his eyes scanning her body, as though searching for an excuse to escalate the situation. "We've received reports of stolen luxury vehicles in the area," Ward said, not meeting her gaze. "This one matches the description. Step out of the car." "Excuse me?" Ava's tone hardened. "What are you talking about? This is my vehicle. I have all the paperwork to prove it." "We're not interested in your excuses. Out of the car," Ward barked. Ava's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice firm. "I'm not getting out unless you tell me why. You're harassing me for no reason." The officers exchanged a glance, then Jennings' hand went to his belt, grabbing for his baton. "Let's do this the hard way, then," he said with a sneer. Ava's mind raced, her body frozen for a split second, but then she knew. This wasn't just a traffic stop. She could feel it in the air, the tension, the unspoken judgment, the fear of something much worse to come. "Please don't make me do this," Ava said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. With a sudden movement, Jennings swung the baton toward her window. Ava, in one fluid motion, threw herself backward, her hand grabbing the handle of the door. She opened it just in time to deflect the strike. The officers froze for a second, both visibly surprised. Jennings immediately stepped back, his face turning red as he realized his attempt to escalate had been thwarted. Ward, however, stepped forward, reaching for his taser. "You've made a big mistake, lady," he sneered, ready to fire. Before he could pull the trigger, Ava stepped forward, closing the distance between them. With the precision of someone trained for moments like this, she reached out and twisted Ward's arm, disarming him in one swift movement. His taser clattered to the ground. "What the hell?" Ward stammered, but Ava was already one step ahead. She spun him around, locking him in a hold that had him gasping for breath. Jennings, now realizing the situation was slipping out of his control, reached for his radio, but Ava had already anticipated his move. With a fluid motion, she knocked the radio out of his hands and pinned him against the BMW. "Who are you?" Jennings asked, fear creeping into his voice as his partner struggled in her grasp. Ava paused. "My name is Ava Patel, and I've been trained by the best in counterterrorism." Her words hung in the air, and the two officers stood frozen, their arrogance vanishing as they realized the gravity of their situation. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air, and Ava's grip loosened just enough for them to understand what was coming next. The sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of backup. Ava could hear the screech of tires as two patrol cars came into view, skidding to a halt. Out of the first car stepped Officer Carla Martin, a no-nonsense veteran, her eyes scanning the scene with a sharp focus.
She immediately assessed the situation. 2 officers, out of their depth, and a woman in complete control of the situation. "Sergeant Jennings," Martin said, her voice firm but calm, "what's going on here?" Jennings, still pinned against the BMW, was speechless for a moment. His earlier bravado had completely evaporated. He tried to regain some semblance of authority, but it was clear that his confidence was shattered. We had a suspect, ma'am," Jennings muttered, his voice weak. "She resisted arrest, attacked Officer Ward and me." Martin's gaze flicked toward Ava, assessing the calm in her demeanor. "You attacked 2 officers?" she asked, a hint of disbelief in her voice. Ava didn't even flinch. "I defended myself," Ava said, her voice unwavering. "They tried to arrest me for no reason, and when they escalated, I responded accordingly." Ward, still panting and clutching his side where Ava had struck him, struggled to regain his composure. "She's lying. We had every right to stop her. This car is stolen." Ava glanced at Martin. "This car is registered to me, officer. I'm happy to provide all the details." Ava's composure was starting to unsettle Jennings and Ward. They weren't used to being challenged, let alone by a woman who had clearly outclassed them physically. But even more disturbing to them was the utter lack of fear in her eyes. She wasn't intimidated, and that, more than anything, was what made them uneasy. Martin stepped closer, her voice now stern. "I'm going to need you both to step aside. Now." She motioned for the officers to move out of the way, signaling for backup to take over. As they complied, Martin took out her own radio and immediately requested backup from Internal Affairs, her voice cold and controlled. She knew this wasn't just a minor incident, something far more serious was unfolding. As she turned back to Ava, the tension in the air was palpable. The officers, despite their initial confidence, were now on the defensive. Ward's hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his uniform, still processing the fact that his attempt to subdue Ava had failed spectacularly. "You're making a huge mistake," Jennings said, attempting to salvage some form of dignity. "She's a criminal. She attacked us for no reason." Ava gave him a hard stare, refusing to back down. "The only criminal here is you. You saw a woman of color in an expensive car and you assumed I didn't belong here. You're the ones who made this a situation." Martin turned back to Jennings and Ward, her voice now sharper. "I've reviewed the body cam footage and it's all on record. We'll be going through everything. You two have a lot to explain to do." The arrival of more patrol cars marked the final turning point in the situation. As more officers stepped out, Ava remained calm, even as the atmosphere became more intense. She could see the officers who were now surrounding the scene, and the shift in energy was unmistakable. Their posture was different from that of Jennings and Ward. They were calm, but they were also alert, clearly aware of the gravity of the situation. Internal Affairs arrived minutes later, a senior officer stepping out of an unmarked car. He wasted no time and approached Martin. "What's the status?" he asked, his tone professional, but with a hint of urgency. "2 officers engaged in racial profiling and aggressive misconduct. I need a full investigation, and I need their body cams reviewed immediately. We've got a serious problem here." The IA officer nodded. "We'll take it from here." Ava, who had remained largely silent as the situation unfolded, now spoke up again. "I want both of them held accountable for their actions. This wasn't just about a bad traffic stop. This was about them deciding that because I didn't look like I belonged in this neighborhood, I was a criminal. That needs to be addressed." The IA officer met her gaze and gave a small nod. "We're on it." As the scene became more controlled, Martin turned back to Ava, her voice softer now. "You did well to protect yourself. This could have gone a lot worse if you hadn't acted when you did." Ava shrugged, the weight of the situation settling into her bones. "I wasn't going to let them get away with it." Ava's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, seeing an incoming call from her mentor, Captain Liam Carter. His name on the screen was enough to make her exhale in relief. She answered quickly. "Captain Carter," Ava said, her voice steady, "the situation is under control, but we need a full review of these officers' actions. They tried to arrest me for no reason, and they assaulted me." "I'm already on it," Captain Carter replied, his voice calm but urgent. "I've been briefed. I'll make sure they don't get away with this. Just stay where you are, Ava. We're sending more support." Ava nodded, thankful for his swift response. As the night began to settle, the situation slowly but surely began to resolve. The two officers were escorted away in handcuffs, their faces pale and their shoulders slumped. They had tried to manipulate the situation, but they couldn't escape the truth. Ava stood beside her car, her posture relaxed yet firm. She knew that what had happened today wasn't an isolated incident. Racial profiling, police misconduct, these were systemic issues that couldn't be ignored. As the internal affairs continued their investigation, Ava's mind wandered to the larger issue at hand. She wasn't just fighting for justice for herself, she was fighting for every person who had been unjustly targeted, every person who had been treated as less than because of the color of their skin. Minutes later, Captain Carter arrived in his unmarked car, stepping out with a sense of authority. He looked over the scene, taking in the gravity of what had transpired. Without saying a word, he walked toward Ava and gave her a firm, respectful nod. "You handled that well," he said quietly. Ava didn't smile. "It's not over yet, but it's a start." Ava got into her BMW and started the engine, the quiet hum of the car contrasting with the chaos of the day. She took a last look at the officers being escorted away, knowing this was just the beginning. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that the system, for once, was working in her favor.
The next morning, the city of Willow Creek woke up unaware that a quiet stretch of Birchwood Avenue had become the epicenter of a storm that was about to shake the department to its core. Ava Patel sat at her kitchen table, a cup of untouched coffee cooling in front of her. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind with unsettling clarity. The lights, the accusations, the moment when Jennings' face shifted from arrogance to fear. She wasn't shaken, but she was focused. She knew how these situations often went. Officers closed ranks, stories changed, evidence disappeared. That was why she had already taken steps. Her phone buzzed again. Captain Liam Carter's name flashed across the screen. "They tried," he said without preamble when she answered. "Jennings and Ward gave their statements this morning, claimed you were aggressive from the start." Ava exhaled slowly. "I expected that." "But here's the problem for them," Carter continued. "Body cams, dash cams, and a bystander." Ava's brow furrowed. "A bystander?" Construction worker across the street, he was on break, caught the entire stop on his phone. Clear audio, clear video. He already handed it over. A faint, controlled smile touched Ava's lips. Good. By noon, the footage had begun circulating internally. By mid-afternoon, it leaked. The video was brutal in its clarity. It showed Jennings following Ava's BMW long before any lights were activated. It captured Ward saying, "She doesn't belong here." It recorded the unlawful commands, the aggressive body language, the baton raised without cause, and the taser wrought inches from her body. Most damning of all, it showed Ava's actions, measured, defensive, controlled, in stark contrast to the officers' escalating aggression. There was no spin that could save them. Inside the Willow Creek Police Department, the mood turned icy. Officers whispered in hallways, supervisors avoided eye contact. Internal affairs moved quickly, seizing lockers, reviewing past complaints tied to both men. And there were plenty. Jennings had 6 prior complaints, Ward had 4. All had been quietly dismissed. Not this time. That evening, a press conference was called. Cameras lined the steps of City Hall as Chief Eleanor Briggs stepped forward, her expression grave. Ava stood off to the side, flanked by Captain Carter and a city attorney. "We have reviewed extensive footage related to an incident involving officers Robert Jennings and Jack Ward. What we observed does not align with the values or standards of this department." Reporters leaned forward. "Effective immediately," Briggs continued, "both officers are suspended without pay pending termination proceedings. The case has been referred to the district attorney for potential criminal charges." A murmur rippled through the crowd. One reporter shouted, "Was race a factor?" Chief Briggs paused. "The evidence strongly suggests racial profiling played a role, and that is unacceptable." All eyes turned to Ava. She stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute.
I didn't speak out because I wanted attention. I spoke out because what happened to me happens to others every day. People without training, without support, without someone to call. This isn't about me winning, it's about accountability. That night, social media erupted. Clips of the stop spread across platforms, millions of views, thousands of comments, some angry, many supportive. The phrase, "she didn't belong until she fought back," trended for hours. And then came the fallout. The district attorney announced formal charges: assault, unlawful detention, abuse of authority. Jennings resigned before termination. Ward was fired outright. Their union attempted a defense, but it collapsed under the weight of the evidence. Civil lawsuits followed. Settlements were discussed. But Ava wasn't done. 2 weeks later, she sat in a packed city council chamber. Residents filled every seat, many standing along the walls. Cameras rolled again as Ava addressed the council. "I don't want a check," she said plainly. "I want policy change, mandatory body cam reviews, independent oversight, real consequences." Silence followed her words. Then applause, slow at first, then thunderous. Within a month, new oversight measures were approved. An independent civilian review board was established. Officers with repeated complaints were flagged for mandatory evaluation and retraining. For the first time in years, the system moved, not because it wanted to, but because it had been forced to. On a quiet afternoon not long after, Ava drove down Birchwood Avenue again. The road looked the same: trees, sidewalks, sunlight filtering through branches. But it felt different. She pulled over briefly, stepped out of her BMW, and took a breath. Not in fear, not in anger, just acknowledgement. Somewhere, someone would see her story and realize they weren't powerless. She got back into her car and drove on. If this story made you pause, think, or feel something, take a second to engage. Drop a comment with your thoughts, share where you're watching from, and show support by liking the video. Stories like this only matter if they're seen, and the more they're shared, the harder it becomes for injustice to stay hidden. Because silence protects no one.